The fertile fields of Ohio, the next stop for Roger and Sarah Bansemer as they visit an unusual 100-year-old barn. Sarah learns of its history as Roger sets up his easel to paint the round barn.
Sarah and I are in Lakeview, Ohio, and we were told about this magnificent barn. And there it is. We've gotten prior permission to come over here and do a painting of this. So I've got my easel here. I'm going to walk over. We'll take a look at this and we'll get set up to do a small painting. It's always interesting to see whether we've brought everything we need to paint out on location, but I think we've got it pretty well down right now. And the sun has gone in. It's getting a little bit chilly out here, and seems to be getting a little windy, a little bit cooler. I have my paints out here and my board, so we'll get started in just a minute. I'll tell you what kind of materials I'm using very quickly. I'm using a few brushes, mainly flat brushes. These are called Brights. I brought along a fan brush or two, and a couple of just small pointed brushes for details. It's the same thing I use pretty much every time I do a painting. I'm using acrylics today. I have white, black, and today I'm just choosing to use the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. I have ultramarine blue, Indian yellow, cadmium yellow, and naphthol red. The Indian yellow is a warm yellow, and the cadmium yellow is a cool yellow. I might put some more colors out later on if I choose, but I'm going to start with these. I'm working on an 8 by 10 inch piece of masonite that's covered with gesso. And before I got out here, I primed this with a little bit of burnt sienna. Just squirted a little bit of burnt sienna over there, rubbed it around with a soft rag. So I have a nice warm tone to begin with. I have my drawing here, which I've done fairly dark because I want the drawing to show through any paint that I put on there. If it's too light, then I can lose my drawing, and I don't want that. So I think I'm about ready to get started. This is harvest season here at this farm. It's a huge farm, 4,000 acres, grow all kinds of crops, primarily corn right now. This is a busy time of year, so we're gonna have a little bit of truck traffic in the background, but I don't think that's going to bother us. I've got this sprayer. This is an essential part of my toolkit. I always bring this with me. Keeps my paints wet, keeps my board a little bit wet too. I'm gonna start by putting in my background colors here. I'm gonna mix up a little bit of black, white, and ultramarine blue. Down here towards the horizon, I'm going to warm this sky up just a little bit with some Indian yellow and maybe a little bit of naphthol red. I'm really glad I put this burnt sienna color in here because this really helps me eliminate this bright white of the canvas, and I can more easily establish my values this way. Putting in a little bit of sky over here, even though there's mostly trees, everything's a little bit grayer and duller today than it would be if the sun were out. Yellow, black, make a pretty nice green sometimes, sort of an olive green. Much of the time I can leave this rough brushwork down here and have it come through in the finished painting. I'd rather have fewer strokes in my painting than try and get a little brush and try and paint every blade of grass. This brush here, this little Bright here, is a little bit beat up. It's getting a little bit used, but good thing for painting trees. I like to work from dark to light whenever I can. And I also like to work from colors that are a little bit duller into colors that are a little bit brighter. So I like to have these colors a little bit duller and darker, then put my bright colors over it. Maybe before I go too much further here, I'll pick up my small pointed brush and place these tree trunks in here. tree trunks are a little bit warmer. I'll put a touch of red in there for the tree trunks. I'm just using this green I have on my palette, just adding a little bit of red to it. When I squint my eyes and look at these trees, I don't really see that much color difference. There's some, of course, you know, but not that much. And they're pretty much the same value. So just by warming this tree trunk here will give me all the difference I need. I don't need to make the tree trunk brown and the leaves green, you know. I want everything to have this unity to it where you can say this is one tree. This is not a whole bunch of parts. Also, when tree trunks hit the ground, I always take the same color I use for the tree trunk and just use that same color as for a shadow. Now comes that roof. Of course, the roof is black, but it's not really black. It's pretty far from black, actually. I think that to maintain some unity in this painting, I'm going to stay with this green that I just mixed up here. I'll put a little bit of black in it. Now, instead of using black, I can just as easily use blue, Indian yellow, and red. And I can pretty much get the same darkness of same black color as I could just by picking up the black. Sometimes using black just is a little bit of a time saver. We've seen a number of beautiful buildings and architecture around this area, and a few days ago we visited a covered bridge that was made in 1877. Let me say a little bit about this drawing before I get too much further. And that's about the perspective on painting something round like this. Basically what I have here is a number of ovals, and at the horizon line the oval is completely flat. You can't see the top or the bottom. So here the oval, although it's still a circular barn, it's completely flat. It's like looking at a plate dead on, like that. And as we go up, we can see the top of the plate, but we can't see the back of it, or the top of the barn. We can't see the backside because it's tipped like that. As we go down beneath the horizon, we start to see the bottom of the barn, and we will see this edge of it. Of course, we won't see the back of it. So what we have here is a number of ovals. Here's the flat oval. Down here, even though it's not much below the horizon line, there's a little bit of an oval that curves down and around. Here above the horizon line, we have ovals that start to curve this way, and we see the top of them. So they go this way, and then from the horizon down, the ovals go this way. And when I draw these ovals, I draw the oval as a complete oval. Maybe I do it very much lighter on the other side than I do the front side, but I continue that oval around. I just don't draw from one side to the other. If I were to do that, I always find that I just end up with more like a curve instead of something that flows. The roof and the red of this barn are not too different in value. They're pretty close. This is where it pays off to have made this drawing quite dark, because I can still see my pencil lines through that. So as I continue to block in some of these areas, I bet you'd really like to see the interior of this barn. So Sarah and the owner are going to show you around.
We're near Lakeview, Ohio, and we're on the farm of Tim Manchester. This is a 4,000-acre farm filled with soybeans, corn, and this is harvest time, but Tim is going to take out a few minutes and show us the interior of this magnificent barn that was built in 1908 by his great-grandfather. I'd love to see the inside.
Let's go.
All right.
My great-great-grandfather came here originally in 1858, which is 150 years ago. And his son then, my great-grandfather, built this barn in 1908. And interestingly, every generation has had a part in this.
It seems like we came in on level 2.
Yep. This would have been the level that they probably had wagons here. I always heard they made this level, or this driveway, wide enough so that 2 wagons could pass. And then on the outside was oat storage. On the inside, especially there, was ear corn storage. Above was the hay mow where hay was stored, and then the cattle would have been down on the lower floor. And I can show you, we could walk around and I can show you roughly how they fed the cattle from here.
That'd
cattle
be great.
And the horses.
Oh, I'd love to walk around.
Okay.
I noticed some interesting trap doors built into the flooring here. How do they work?
Well, yeah, they go all the way around because originally horses were fed basically on the floor below us from this wall into the center in the horse stalls down there. The cattle would have been outside. So then loose hay was stored upstairs in the hay mow on the 3rd floor, and it would have been forked down to this floor on the floor, and then could have been distributed to the cattle around the outside. And also it could be distributed to the horses, which would have been inside down below. So basically they could get hay to the cattle and the horses off from this floor probably pretty efficiently for back then.
So was it moved mostly with a pitchfork?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Some went down and some went over here?
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, they did everything by hand back then. I'm pretty sure when they'd drive a wagon up here and they would just shovel all the oats by hand over into here, or they would have shoveled the ear corn into the corn crib there around the silo. I didn't mention that in the center, the very center of the barn, there's an 18 by 45 foot tall silo. So they had silage, hay, oats, corn, all under one roof for all the livestock. My uncle talked about how it was so nice to come in here in the winter and the heat from the cattle would just heat the whole barn. So it was a nice warm place to work. I don't know about the smell, but the temperature was good. What we use this barn mainly for today is conditioning soybean seed.
Well, do you ever have any time off?
Oh, we try to.
Well, I've enjoyed this level. How about the lower level? Can we go down there and see what happens?
Sure can.
Okay.
Just have to be careful of the stairs. And tall people need to watch their head there.
Oh, I'm glad you said something. Okay. Yeah. Gosh.
Well, the cattle would have been out here. And originally there were horse stalls or some kind of stalls all the way around on the inside, as I understand it. Interestingly, we have an old bulletin from the University of Illinois talking about the benefits of a round barn. And it talks about how cattle are narrow at the front and bigger at the back. So a wedge-shaped cow just fits real well around a circle.
It's great.
That's what the University of Illinois said about 100 years ago.
You've got some wonderful old tractors and an old Chevy truck.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting story. The old Chevy truck, that's a 1942. There weren't many 1942s that made it to the farm because that was in the middle of the war. But they were growing tomatoes on the farm back then, and because they were growing tomatoes and needed to haul the tomatoes to the canning factory, they were able to get a 1942 truck. Very scarce. Most of them went to the war effort then.
During this busy harvest season, how long is your day?
Well, we usually start 7:30 or 8, and a lot of times, I guess usually we'll run at least till 9 o'clock, sometimes 10, sometimes midnight. On a rare occasion, later than that, but not too often.
Tim, thank you so much for taking time during this busy season to show us around. I've just fallen in love with your farm. All 4,000 acres. It's magnificent.
Well, I'm glad you could stop, and you sure had a great day, and so you can enjoy the rest of your day sightseeing, and I'll enjoy the rest of my day combining some beans.
Okay, and I'll think about you next time I eat popcorn.
Yes, please do.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
What's really amazing about that barn is that it was not made up of short, straight pieces of wood. All that wood in there, even those large beams, were soaked and heated and bent to their appropriate shapes. It's really a piece of art. Well, the weather seems to be holding out a little bit here, so that's good. As I said, it is the busy season here for harvest, so we've got some more trucks over here working. I'm just going to continue painting. We get a little bit of dust every now and then too. Picked up a small pointed brush. I'm going to put some of these details in. As I squint my eyes, this white looks to be about the same value as the sky. Actually, it looks a little bit lighter than the value of the sky, but the reason that is because it's up against this dark area. And whenever you have a light area within some dark areas, it makes it look lighter than it actually is. But I think it's about the same value as the sky. I'm going to put that white trim in now. And as I do that, I've got to think of that oval, because I've lost it a little bit in the drawing. But having put it in there to begin with, I get the feel of what it has to be. And I'll just try and get that feel of that oval. When the perspective is this far away and it's that subtle, you just sort of have to feel it in your hands to get that right arc. This starts to get pretty flat here because this oval is getting down pretty close to the horizon. This is where it really counts to have some good brushes. Can't do these fine lines with a brush that's been used very long. They don't last very long anyway. Now this oval down here, here's my horizon line right back here. So this oval here, I have to swoop this oval this way. Above the horizon line, I swoop them this way, below this way. It's good we're using acrylics. Maybe oil paints would catch all this dust, but this is all dry, so I don't have to worry about much dust getting on here. Now, what I said about adjusting really holds true, because now as I paint this, I can see these windows are a little bit too dark for what I want, so I may brighten those up. Got a beautiful field of corn back there, just miles of it. Put a little bit of that in right now, too. I'm going to try and let some of this burnt sienna show through my painting. Try and maintain that warmth. My three primary colors, yellow, blue, and red. And I managed to mix a green out of that just because I used less red. You can see the trees and the roof of this barn are almost the same value. When I squint my eyes, I can't really tell any difference between them. I can in color, but not in value. And I like that because it sort of ties the tree and the barn together. It makes them sort of one unit of the composition. Gray day, there's not a lot of color jumping out at me here. This is always the stage of the painting that I say to myself, what have I gotten myself into? Because at this stage of a painting, it always seems like it's just not hitting it. It's just not going where I want it to go. But I always try and persist, because I know I have to put in these basic fundamentals, these basic shapes to the painting before I can start to refine it and bring it to life. If I don't get these basic, almost, round, square, big shapes in, if I don't get those down at first and I start working on the details too soon, the painting won't hold together in the long run. A lot of their crop here is popcorn, which I found sort of interesting, because this grass sort of goes over here. Even though everything is just flattened out, it's just so flattened out today that I don't get much sensation of form. Even though we got a round barn, it seems very flat, and that's just the condition of the weather. So I'm going to have to sort of work with that and try and overcome that a little bit, and still maybe try and maintain the atmosphere that I'm enjoying here. Now the light is catching these windows a little bit more on the bottom than on the top. And a little bit more on the one side than the other. I wish everything would come together all at once so much more quickly than it does. The very first part seems easy, and then it gets very difficult. And then the finishing touches take a lot more time, but they always seem to sort of come together at the end too. So painting always goes in this phase of difficulty and ease and difficulty. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But of course, I always try and tell myself that it's only a painting, And if it doesn't come out, and sometimes they don't, it's no great loss. The joy of sitting here at such a special location, the privilege of seeing such magnificent sights around the country, really makes it all worthwhile. And if I get a good painting, then it's just sort of a bonus. And I think as we travel around, just the knowledge and the experience of all this, because I'm always consciously looking at things very carefully and trying to analyze the colors and the values. So even if I don't end up with painting day after day, it's almost a sort of a painting of the mind to study these conditions of light and shadow. And that's what fascinates me so much. Well, I put out some fresh colors. These were starting to dry up a little bit too much here. And as I sat here doing that, one thing I noticed about this painting is my color harmony. And it's not too good. It doesn't exist too much. I thought this warmer sky down here would look good, especially because the barn is warm, but it really doesn't have the color harmony that I want. So I'm going to have to adjust a lot of this, and probably I'll start with the sky right now. I'll spray my board so I can put a wash of color on this. I don't want to totally eliminate what I have on there. I just want to make some fine adjustments. It may be that days like this that are so gray are maybe the most difficult times to paint, because everything becomes so subtle, and it's hard to really tell what color things are. We're so used to pure colors, and even the naming of colors. You know, this is blue, this is red, this is yellow, but here we have no names for these colors. I mean, it's grayish this, bluish that, and so on. So it's really hard to make this clear definition of what it should be. I basically say to myself, is this a warm color or a cool color? And I kind of go from there. This painting, to me, looks a little lopsided. It's just too heavy over here. So I don't know exactly what to do with that yet, but I think if I put maybe some shadows across this way, even though I'm not getting any shadows today, so maybe if I vary that a little bit, it can help to balance this a little bit better. I do want to be sure that this barn is anchored firmly to the earth here, so I'm going to make these values very close. I don't want this to look like the barn was pasted on the board, and I don't want to look like there's a whole bunch of pieces pasted on. This has to have a unity. These all have to relate to each other. So one way to do that is to keep the values close to each other when they touch. Also, I can even bring some of this green up into this barn here, and that sort of connects it. This way I can't even really distinguish where the earth starts and the barn stops. Now, if the sun came out right now, came across that field, I'm sure we would have a nice patch of bright yellow highlight right across there. Just a little feeling of what the sun might be like coming in there. I have to play a few tricks with this in order to pull this painting off and get it the way I want it. I know I have to do certain things in order to make the painting come to life. And I've found for myself little patches of light here and there often do the trick. And I'll try and get some texture in here. This sky and this grass, pretty much the same texture, a little bit boring. So I need to, for myself, make this a little more interesting down in this area. So I'll try and do that. One problem with this painting too is that the view I have of this barn, it's just very symmetrical, and that always poses a bit of a problem. I tried to offset it with these trees here, but this is really the only place I could sit, because there's other equipment and everything around here, is to get a good shot of this barn. So a lot of times when I'm out on location, it's really, you have to go with what's there and try and make the best of it. Here in the foreground, my colors of the grass will be a little more vivid than in the background. That's just because there's a little less atmosphere here than there is back there. Well, I'm finally getting some layers in this painting that are starting to make a little bit of sense. Wow, here comes a big tractor. Well, I think I've taken this painting about as far as I can out here in the field. The temperature, I think, has dropped about 15 degrees since we started in the short time we've been out here. This has been a tough painting, I've got to say. I think a lot of that has to do with the composition, but some paintings come off very easily, some paintings come off tough. You just never know. That's part of the advantages and disadvantages of painting on location. But we'll take this into the studio. I'll work on some of the details. We'll work on the form, the color, the values, and so on. At that point, I'll sign it, I'll varnish it, and we'll take a look at it and see what it looks like.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.